Hey there, welcome back to Surviving Animation, your guide to making it the business of cartoons. My name's Eric Calderon, and today I have a guest named Nilah Magruder. Nilah, say hi.
Hey, gang.
Nilah and I have known each other for a little bit, and she is actually a lot of things. She is a comic book creator.
Yeah.
She's an illustrator, designer. You've done some work in animation.
Yes, I've been all over the place.
Yep.
I've worked for Disney, worked for DreamWorks on the publishing side. I've written for Marvel. I've published some graphic novels.
And on top of that all, you are also the event coordinator at Black and Animated, which is an advocacy and education group focused on the empowerment of the Black community in animation.
Yes. Yeah, we've been operating since 2018, I believe. And we started out as a podcast and just last year moved into doing some event coordinating, hosting, networking mixers that bring Black professionals in to meet with executives and employees at studios. And since 2020 and the pandemic and everything, a lot of our operations have moved virtually, but we're still continuing those efforts.
Well, that's one of the main reasons I reached out to you. So I mean, even recently, Black and Animated got some press, and
Yeah.
I've been kind of deep diving into your podcast, and I realized Surviving Animation and Black and Animated have a little bit in common, which is we're both educational platforms, and we're both really trying to make give more knowledge out there into the world.
Yeah, exactly. And that is especially important right now, now that we're kind of all stuck at home and wondering what direction the animation industry is going to take. And so
Yes.
it's kind of exciting to see these groups coming together and providing like networking and education and resources to not only professionals, but, people who hope to enter the industry.
Exactly. And I think that is really music to my ears as well, because I think the few people who have come to Surviving Animation, have been from all different walks of life. Some have been professionals in the industry for 15, 20 years, and some people have never picked up a pencil. Some people are just fans of cartoons, and it's really nice to have all those people talk about the business of cartoons, which, was kind of a nice transition, because as you and I were kind of talking before we started recording, we realized, we have these really nice different backgrounds. And at the base level, we have a lot of questions for each other. And, I thought I would take this episode to just let us ask questions of each other and, hope to leave, more enriched on both sides. So please, you first.
Yeah, sure. So, my experience is just as an artist. And last year, I got the opportunity to actually, visit some studios and pitch an animated series, but I don't really know much about that world and what goes on behind the scenes. So, like, what jobs are available on the executive level in development? Who's, who's pulling the strings there? Who's getting shows greenlit?
That's a really good question. So to start off with, I mean, especially in terms of, Black representation, there's just so few executives right now who really are pulling the strings, like you said. And I think I'm hoping, with our shared platforms, this conversation can help demystify what some of those jobs are. So I think at the very basic level, there are three kind of paths to get into development executive positions. And, I can talk about like the network side, kind of the production company side, and the agency side, so ultimately, going up the development path includes something like an assistant or an internship kind of role, which, almost anyone can get. You then go into kind of a coordinating position, but you have to be careful not to go into the production coordinating, but go into the development coordinating. So, it's still the whole world before you make something. So when you go from the assistant to coordinator, you start to go into the creative executive route. And creative executive are the kind of early, kind of foragers for new ideas, and then they bring it back to their bosses and, kind of go bring in material, they start to nurture it on their own. And then from the creative executive, you start to go into the, director of development, vice president of development, manager of development level, where you're now managing other people, and then finally into a VP or an SVP position.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, the reason I said 3 paths is the network side is, someone like, I think one of the co-founders of Black and Animated is Neil Wade.
Yes.
And Neil Wade is a great case study for a network path because he started with an internship and then he was in the executive ranks as a coordinator, working with her, and then going up and up and up from there. Right?
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you
And
could
he
be.
just became a manager,
Oh, he's a
actually.
manager now. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. That's
It's
fantastic.
great.
Yeah. Now, if you go up the production company side, you could be at like an actual production facility, like
Okay.
a bento box or like a titmouse or a, Bardell Entertainment, and excuse me,
No worries.
I lost my voice.
Oh no.
Okay.
Yeah. Edit it in post.
We're gonna leave it in. We're leaving it in. It's allergy season. That's what happens. So then we might have to start again. I really did lose my voice.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, I'll stop. Hold on.
Take your time.
That's amazing. No, I'm fighting through. I'm keeping the record on.
Okay.
Stay with us, everyone.
You good?
Surviving animation is about surviving through losing your voice.
Yes.
Yes, I came back. So what I was going to say is if you're like a bento box or Bardell, they have their own departments and you could work under there on the same path and then eventually become a director of development there.
Oh, wow.
And if you're at the agency side, you could start as a junior agent or, working under a famous talent manager. And then you'll start to follow the path up there to become a development executive.
Okay.
So does that give you a good general question, the kind of jobs out there?
It does. And so like current series rolls into this department as well, correct?
Yeah, now current is interesting because, development is of course everything up until a green light. But then current means the series is ongoing. So if you're a manager on season 3 of Casa Grandes, no one's pitching you a new show anymore.
Okay.
You're managing the process that's within.
Interesting. Okay.
So I think, for new young Black executives that come into the development side, it's much more influential.
Yeah.
Because you're helping decide which shows go on the air as opposed to managing shows that are currently in production.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And I do have a follow-up question.
Please go for it.
So what if you're an artist and you decide to transition into development? Is that a possibility?
It is. And there's a couple of really great examples. So Phil Rinda, who actually has a very high position at Netflix, is kind of a development executive in between, artists and production. He started off as an artist. And he started off as actually in the production pipeline. But, someone who just has the bug to be an executive, you're in the system in some way and you can transition over so long as you kind of force your networking and your career goal on that side. So I love artist executives because they know the process and they can be a lot more nimble as an executive than someone like me who can't draw and has never had to. I just have less access to solutions that an artist would. So artist to executive is like, I'm all for it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So ready for your question?
Let's go.
Okay. So as an executive who, like every executive out there wants to see more Black content, in the field of animation. I mean, what do you think? And I'll say this directly because I feel like that's the case. What are we doing wrong that we need to do better or improve on when it comes to, bringing more Black content to cartoons?
Well, I guess the one glaring thing is executives aren't acquiring shows from Black creators. We're not really seeing any Black showrunners or Black directors who have pitched their own story and it's made it to production. some of the very few examples that we have are, you know, Bruce Smith and the Proud Family, which has been rebooted over at Disney, which is great.
Fantastic.
You know, we have LaShawn Thomas, who actually left America to
To
get
go
his
to
show there.
Korea. Yeah.
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 Um, but there really aren't a lot of examples. And it's kind of, you know, it's just staggering to think over this nearly century long history of animation and animation studios. And you can count the number of Black run shows on your hands.
Right.
Yeah, you know, there's definitely a disconnect there. Over on the publishing side, something that Black authors experience a lot is this idea that, oh, well, we already have our Black book for the season, so we can't acquire any more. And it's, you know, it's so odd because like white authors really don't experience that barrier. No one's
Right.
saying, oh, we already have our white author for the season, so
Oh
we
my
can't
gosh, you're
acquire
right.
any more of those books. And, you know, I wonder if that happens on the animation side as well. You know, you look at Black pitches and, you know, maybe execs are saying, oh, we already have our Black show, we can't take any more. Or, you know, maybe, I don't know, are they accepting pitches from Black creators at all? Are Black creators even getting into the room?
Right. That's a really good point. Now, I'd like to follow up with you one point on that because, you know, publishing is a mass medium that will always be faster than, you know, cartoons and movies and films. So, in ways, the things that happen in publishing will eventually bleed over into the, you know, the more kind of larger team, bigger budget marketplace of entertainment. So,
Mm-hmm.
when you talked about, like, you know, oh, we have we have our Black show already, we don't need another one, you know, can you go further on that? Because I think I realize that as an executive I make the mistake of going, when I think about what is a you know, kind of a Black experience story,
Yeah.
you know, am I making a mistake on where I think those things are?
Yeah. You know, like our experiences really run the gamut there. It's hard to say, you know, what the Black experience is because it's so many things. You know, there's the Black American experience, and that varies from region to region, that varies from community to community. You know, there's the entire diaspora, so you're looking at like Black Caribbean experiences, African experiences, you know, European experiences. And so we all have our own individual story that we want to tell. And, you know, unfortunately, up till this point, a lot of the you know, a lot of the Black experience that gets communicated in television tends to be, you know, the inner city, like Black life that is dominated by rap and hip hop and crime and, you know, tragedy. And, you know, we also have the slavery narrative. So if it's a historical story, like, you know, Black people only exist if they're slaves. And so I think, you know, culturally, we have this internal bias of what we expect Black creators, what stories we expect to see from them. And if a Black creator presents something that is outside of that expectation, maybe you look at it and say, oh, this isn't, you know, this isn't authentic, or, you know, this really isn't the story we want to see. And
Right.
so it kind of takes, you know, it takes inclusivity. It takes, you know, having more Black presence in your community, in your
Mm,
workplace, to
mm.
understand that, hey, we're just people too, and
Yeah.
we have like a wide diversity of stories that we want to tell. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm. What kind of stories do you want to tell?
i I'm all about Black girls going on adventures and having awesome superpowers. And, you know, like, I think my baby was MFK. It was my graphic novel. And
Hmm.
it's a story about, it's, you know, kind of a weird story about a Black teenager who is just trying to find closure and take her mother's ashes back to her homeland, but she also has these superpowers that constantly get her into trouble. And
Wow.
it's a road trip story.
Does
And
it take place in the current world, or is it a fantasy world, or?
it's secondary world fantasy. And it's very much influenced by my roots in anime. I grew up loving like magical girl stories. I grew up
Mm-hmm.
loving shonen. So
Mm-hmm.
like Naruto, One Piece, all of that stuff. And even before then, as a kid, I loved He-Man and She-Ra. I loved My Little Pony, which was very like kind of high fantasy. I loved anything that kind of had just wild, outlandish characters going on these grand epic adventures and fighting evil and doing good and finding the power within themselves. And that's
Right.
still what captivates me now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of my favorite shows growing up, that I was really upset didn't have a black character, and it was Black Star.
Black Star. I
That's
don't think
like
I've seen it.
that is a fantasy animation that was done by the same guys who did He-Man. So it's
Okay.
like half
Yeah.
rotoscoped and like half live action. But there
Yeah.
was this like kind of Tarzan looking dude who had a sword that got split in half, and you like run on a dragon, and like the bad guy had the other half of his sword, and I was kind of like, it's called Black Star. Like I didn't,
Yeah.
even as a kid, I was kind of like confused. Like it's like the
Yeah.
sword wasn't black. It's like, well, what? Like it was just weird to me. So yeah, that's a deep
Yeah.
dive if you want to look up Black Star.
I'm
So
gonna.
that's
And
great.
yeah,
That's great.
like sometimes, looking back, it feels like in the 90s, especially, there
Mm,
was more Black representation. Like you could just find it easier on television. But within animation, you still kind of had to dig. Like, I think growing up, we all watched Thundercats and just
mm-hmm.
like took Panther to be the
Panthro,
black
Panthro.
character.
That's right.
Panther, yeah.
That's right.
He was the
Panthro.
black character. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
clearly. And you kind of had to do that with all of your media. Just look for
Yeah.
like what is the one black representative that I can lash on to, even if they're
Yeah.
not really black.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember there was always a couple black guys in GI Joe,
Yeah.
right? And then there was the Mr. T cartoon.
I remember was I remember that cartoon like very barely, but I
Yeah.
remember it.
To me, it was so strange because I think it was right around the bloom of like Rocky 3. And
Uh,
suddenly they made this cartoon where Mr. T was, um he had like a bunch of teenage gymnasts, and they all like solve crime.
oh my
And the
God.
great thing
Yeah.
is that Mr. T would just run, right?
Yeah.
But then they're all doing these cartwheels and flips and everything, and I'm like, Mr. T's just running, and he's still got the cut off jean jacket, you
Yeah.
know but anyway.
That's amazing.
That's right. All right, so it's your turn. A question for me about animation development.
Okay, let's see. So, how does someone get a job in development?
Yep. That's a good, that's a okay. How do I approach this in the easiest way? Well, I can start with my anecdote. My anecdote is the reason I got in development is I was a temporary assistant, just sitting on a desk at MTV in like 94, right? So I just had a temp job.
Hmm.
But sitting on my desk was the scripts and the presentation for Eon Flux, which is a series I used to watch in shorts on Liquid Television.
Yeah.
Here's the series adaptation, right? So I was like, oh, this is really cool. So I went to business school, and I didn't go to film school, but I studied like story and mythology and all this stuff as part of my religion minor. So
Hmm.
I kind of took this scripts, and I just tried to act like a business kid. And I was like, do you want me to read these for you? Because you're a busy boss. And the boss said, sure. And so I read it, and I took little sticky notes, and I put little notes on each page. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just was intuitively kind of troubleshooting what I thought was really great and what I loved about it, and what I thought was kind of a clerical error, or like oh, this happened here and it didn't match up over there. And then I wrote a cover page that was like a business letter, to whom it may concern. I have read the following materials and have found these things. Please feel free to, use these notes as you wish. Sincerely, your assistant, Eric Calderon. So I gave it to my boss, and about 3 days later, I got a call from the office saying, our boss would like to meet you. I thought I did something wrong. I went to the office, and they said, where did you learn to do script coverage and where did you go to film school? And I said, I don't know what script coverage is. And they have school for films?
Oh,
Like,
wow.
no. So they hired me as a reader.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, one thing that I try to tell anyone who wants to be a young executive, one of the most important skills you can have, and especially in the early part of your career, is learning how to summarize and communicate.
Mm,
It's really the key skill that executives will, kind of work over time,
mhm.
because our job is, at its most reductive, is what comes in, we have to understand, translate, and sell to a dozen people. That's what we do. So we are communicators. Usually we are not the talent. Usually we're not the maker or the creator. We have to help that maker and creator go from here to there.
Okay.
So I think, to go a little deeper, I suppose, the person I think who thrives in development is the person who enjoys helping the process, enjoys moving
Yeah.
things along, and I think over my 26 years, the people who I've seen stay in the business are the ones who love people, the
Mhm.
ones who love material, the ones who love kind of strategy and knowing how to, like, pin the right lawyer with the right executive, with the right buyer, with the right content. They kind of just put together the constellation.
Yeah.
But we're not always the people who, like, run off and write, like, feature screenplays. And we're not always the kind of people who do these, solo ventures out and direct films. And, those have a different calling than
Mhm.
an executive. We're high functioning, dysfunctional extroverts, you know.
Wow.
So I think to get in, to become a development executive, you have to, you have to really work the networking first and foremost. And then I think you have to find some of those hard skills that artists and creators and directors don't have. Financial savvy, legal understanding, do you know how unions work? Do you know how the production process works? Stuff like that. So does that help? Does that give you a general?
Yeah, that's great. Like it reminds me, I spoke to a producer a couple of months ago, and I kind of asked him, like, what do you do exactly? And he said that, he said, I love helping artists get things made.
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, even if you look at, like, the most reductive definition of producer, our job is to produce things. So
Hmm.
you produce things from nothing sometimes. Sometimes you just have a sketch. Sometimes
Yeah.
you have a script. Sometimes, and it sounds weird, you have someone who's got a lot of money who just really wants to spend it.
Yeah.
So you've got to convince them to spend it.
Right.
You know? Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question now,
Okay.
and it's something that you taught me just before we get on the call. You briefly overviewed it, but I want to kind of get down to it. Um, it's an issue in publishing that you called issuization
Hmm.
and ghettoization.
Yeah. So what we see in publishing, and this has been kind of an ongoing saga, like publishing has been having these conversations since like the 19th century, and we're still figuring things out. But, number one thing we see a lot is the assumption that books written by Black authors are only for Black readers. And
Mm,
so there's just this assumption from like not only the publishing side but readers as well, that if it's written by a Black author, then it's a Black book, and
mm,
no one else is going to want to read that book. The other thing we see is just the prioritization of like issue stories. So
mm,
we're talking stories about like police brutality, about crime, about like poverty, all these negative assumptions of what the Black American experience is.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so and slavery is in there as well.
mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of this pressure, I guess, on Black authors to only present their trauma on the
Mm.
page, and any
So
other
actually, you
story.
said
Yeah.
traumatization, not issuization. That's what you said to me.
Well, I would say issueization.
I
Like
see.
the issue is definitely trauma.
Right. Got it.
It's, and it is traumatizing in the sense that, it's the expectation that we relive or just exploit our trauma, for the commodification of white America.
Yeah.
And it's really limiting. It shows a very reductive view of what Black lives are and
Mm,
what our experiences are. Like, hey, I was a small town girl. I grew up in the country. I grew up in the woods. Like, I don't know anything about living in the inner city.
yeah.
I grew up loving classical music. I played the flute for 8 years.
Wow. Cool.
That was my experience growing up. And, coming up, like, there weren't any books like that for me to read. Whenever my mother was always very good about going to flea markets and bringing home whatever book she found for me to read. And I kind of got my like identity. I looked for my identity in the side characters, like
Mm,
Babysitter's Club. um there was one Black character in Babysitter's Club, and when she was introduced, it was about how the community was like entirely white and kind
yeah.
of racist. And that was always the narrative. If there was a Black character, they had to get through that racist hurdle. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And
And
I'll tell
so
you one thing that really always bothers me, and tell me how you interpret this too, which is this kind of like oneization, which
mhm,
is like, oh, there is one Black character. There's
exactly, yeah.
one, and just like, that's just so frustrating.
Very much so. Like, we nailed it. We have our one. And you have to wonder where it comes from. Like, that was never my experience. Like, even living in a predominantly white community, I still lived in a predominantly, Black neighborhood. My family was predominantly Black.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
have a lot of Black friends. And when you see these like friend groups and social groups in media, and there's just the one Black person, it's it's just not a full representation of that person's life.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so one more for me and one more for you, and we'll call it a nice chat.
Yes. So, we discussed like one of the qualities like studios are looking for in an executive is that communication, that ability to summarize a story. So, are there any other qualities that people looking to take the executive path should have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I made another video that I made called "Produce Like Thanos,"
Mm,
and I used all the Infinity Stones as kind of a grounding metaphor to describe all the producer skills. And I think the one thing worth revisiting that idea is that I think sometimes there's a misconception that a producer, and I've just done it myself, which is that we have to be at these balance of all these things, which is kind of true. But at the same time, if I kind of break down, in my video, I said, the power stone is your financial understanding. The space stone is your networking connections. The soul stone is your legal savvy. The reality stone is your production methodology understanding. The mind stone is your ability to understand creative. And the time stone is your time management skills. You can actually be a perfectly good producer with one or two or three of those skills.
okay.
So there is a producer type out there who will get producer credits and who will make things happen because they are a great lawyer. They
Mm,
could just have all the legal, or they could just be an incredible financier. They might know how to go, I see the dream of your thing. I'm going to go get you several $1,000,000 of, grants and tax subsidies. And I can just get money. Like, I know how to collect money. That's my thing. And I think if I'm talking to anyone out there who wants to be a young producer, and if you're super good at one of these things, you can just lean into that and, force your way into reality with that one, and then kind of add the others as you go.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So you don't need to have all of them to have day one. And in fact, one of the ways I've seen producers begin is just to say, I'm a producer of this project. And, they become the producer. And then through trial by fire, a year later, they kind of are.
Wow.
Like if you have a friend with just that gift that you can sense, and they work with you to make a 3-minute animation happen, they're a better producer than like 30% of the producers I know.
Wow.
Because they can just somehow make it happen.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. So last question for you. Let's see. I got to make it a good one. So let me think. Oh, you got to tell me more about Black and Animated. What's coming up next? Where you guys seeing going, and just how the whole effort's going to work out.
Yeah, sure. So, a lot of what we've been doing this past summer is building a contact list of Black professionals who are available for work. And we've been, connecting them with studios and trying to get more Black people hired. More broadly, we are very committed to education, providing resources, and overall, our focus is just uniting the Black community in animation. So we have some workshops and talks that we're lining up through the fall and winter that will, be open to the public. They're going to focus on different aspects of animation production. I can't say much yet because they're going to be announced pretty soon, but we're all really excited about it. Past that, we are looking at the possibility of mentorship. We are working with other advocacy organizations within animation to collaborate and discuss, what other events and initiatives we can keep going through the next year, because what we're seeing a lot right now is everyone's super hyped to help Black artists, and we're seeing a lot of like calls for portfolio reviews and submissions and a lot of like panels and everything, but it's all happening all at once. It's kind of overwhelming. A lot of us are already very overwhelmed with the pandemic and everything that's been going on. And so there's a lot of concern about, are these opportunities going to be available like in 6 months or next year?
Mm-hmm.
And we're here to say that, yes, we are making sure that these initiatives are ongoing, so that even if you're not ready right now, these opportunities will be here in the future. Like we are doing our best to hold studios and hold the community accountable and make sure that this is not a flash in the pan thing, that this conversation is not going to go away. It's just going to evolve.
Yep. That's fantastic. That's great to hear. And, we talked about this before we got on the call, but, I hope to do something with Black and Animated in the future, if I can. And, over the past 6 weeks, as I told you, I dropped all my consulting fees in order to, do consulting for anyone who approached me, so long as they gave me a receipt for a donation that proved that they donated something to an NPO related to Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. And also, if they were actually Black, then I didn't charge them at all. So I did something like 41 consultations over 6 weeks, raised about $3,450. And
that's so amazing.
It was great. I mean, 35% of the people were Black. And I felt I got to hear a lot of new stories, but I think the next phase for me, and I said it to you, and I'll say it here, on the channel, is that I'm really committed to mentoring a young Black female executive in the world of development, which is an area that I think they're just not almost anyone there, and I want to have that person, or people, or a lot of them, so that we could just have more organic conversations with Black creators and Black content. So, whether it's, 40 hours or 60 hours over 3 months, let's definitely talk. And anyone on your platform or my platform who hears this, get in touch with, Nilah or me, and, let's make this happen. Let's get more Black executives in the world of animation development.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. We're so excited for that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I mean, I'll be enriched by working with someone like that who can help teach me what we need to do better, what we're doing wrong, and how we can expand our education to get to know each other all better. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Well, that thank you so much for coming on to the channel. And
Yeah, thanks for
I'll
having me.
no problem. I'll put all your information below so everyone can find out more about you. And thanks. We're gonna wave bye.